Hello and welcome to Insights, everyone. I'm Nigerian.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. Thank you so much for joining us.
In the next few days, open campaigns will officially begin by political parties and their presidential candidates. And we're hoping that these will be different from other campaigns we've seen in the past, with emphasis on issues. In fact, on this episode of the program, I will be touching on several issues of national concern in the hope that parties and their presidential candidates will do same and preferred ideas on best workable strategies to revamp key sectors. Elizabeth is also here. She has an interview lined up for us, which promises to be interesting as well. Elizabeth?
Of course, we'll also focus on the building industry. Building collapse, the figures are increasing. So we sought the opinion of the Standards Organization of Nigeria in terms of conformity to building materials.
It would seem that is happening more often than not, and it's an issue of concern, national concern, I should say. Let's kickstart our conversation. I'm fascinated with the discourse on national monuments and assets and how much is being done to preserve and celebrate
the language issue. We have turned English to become like a pride value in our own cultural value.
It's not cash transfer. It's not a COVID-19.
Invasion 1897 was a deliberate
many of these people coming to the urban areas now.
These and applications, there are terms and conditions.
Of course, it is the union of two people, a man and a woman coming together.
My name is Nigerian.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori.
Sleep, I want sleep that do. I beg you. Now waiting, concern me, concern vote. Now wait, start to the count. Should have seen me, I could just stay with my baba. But I'm shy.
I can stand the faces of the crooked politicians.
Don't say that.
Well, that's exactly how we begin our conversation today. We decide. Apparently the 2023 national elections is on the minds of many in and outside of the country. But you know what? Something struck me quite recently when I came across a rather profound statement by one of the country's former leaders, where he said there is no limit to possibilities in the life of a nation, of any nation. Indeed, I agree totally. with that assertion. Every powerful nation, whether it's the US, it's Russia or Germany, I mean, they have had to face or go through some transition from dark days to glory days, and intermittently they have fleeting moments in between. And I mean, and time and again on this program, I have reiterated the role of leadership and civic responsibilities, or should I say obligations, of citizens. But there is no denying the fact that leadership and government gives direction, and that is key. Incidentally, on this episode, I am joined by two academics, Dr. Adewale Aderemi, Associate Professor of Political Science and Director, Democracy and Governance, National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies here in Abuja. Dr. Aderemi, welcome to Insight.
Good afternoon, Andy.
And also joining us from Houston, Texas, Dr. Akin Falaye. He joins us, of course, like I said, from the United States. He was a former senior research fellow of the same National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies. Gentlemen, or rather, Dr. Falaye, welcome to Insight.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great, fantastic. I wish I had a lady professor or doctor join us in this conversation, but both gentlemen will serve for now. It's good to have both of you here on the program. We will be discussing critical national issues as we prepare for a transition come 2023. And I'd like, maybe I should begin with Dr. Falaye, but I'd like for you to help me lay out something as we begin our conversation. And though it may sound basic, I assure you that I think it could be profound as well. For all of its flaws, Dr. Falaye, democracy and representative governance remains relevant as the unique response to public welfare issues and developments generally. But for the benefits of those less politically enlightened and even critics of democracy itself, please remind me or remind us once again, why does it matter? Why does democratic governance, I mean, why does it matter for it to be effective? I mean, as a key response, public response too. And why can't we embrace, for instance, socialism, for instance, as against democracy? Why democracy?
Well, you've raised an important question. Let me refer to a statement made by Pastor Adeboye about probably 7 months ago. He came to Abuja and he met with Mr. Buhari. And after his meeting with Buhari, he had a press statement outside the Asho Rock. And he said that why can't we make or fashion a system that is 100% Nigerian? You know, when he made that statement, even though he has said severally that he's not a politician, but that is politics in essence, you know, because myself, I've written about democracy in Nigeria, constitutional democracy, which is a quite different term, but until we are able to fashion a system that reflects the reality of Nigeria, I don't think we are going anywhere. If you look at other countries, you cannot import any system to your country without, you know, adjusting it to the environment of your society. It is impossible to import a system from a foreign land and just impose it on yourself or someone else. And this is the problem we have been facing in Nigeria today. When I wrote about constitutional democracy in Nigeria, is to see, you know, is there any way we can, you know, fashion a system that will last forever in Nigeria, so to say.
Dr. Falaye, I reckon you're referencing the fact that we picked a system from the United States, that of course it's presidential system of government from the United States, which of course is also based on the federal system, on federalism, and yet we don't seem, or I mean, we haven't applied or are unable to apply some peculiarities here in Nigeria and model our democracy after the fact. Dr. Falaye, am I correct?
Well, again, like I've said, you know, when you look at Nigeria is a unique environment. It's a pluralistic society with maybe 500 ethnic groups or even more, according to the anthropologists. But when you have a system like that, it's very difficult. What is democratic politics anyway is the distribution of advantages and disadvantages. And when you have in the Nigerian context, you have a permanent majority group and permanent minority group. How do you share, the resources in the country? And that is a problem in a democratic society. According to constitutional democracy, a zero-sum game democratic system in a pluralistic society, let me quote Liphart, he says fallacious. That is the word he used. That is, it's unrealistic. We have to come up with a system that will reflect the reality of that society. I argue it. American democracy is not ideal for Nigeria. It's not. It's too expensive. It's too cumbersome. You cannot.
Let's quickly bring in Dr. Ade Remy here. Of course, I know you've listened to Dr. Falaye. I'd like for you to jump in here. But in responding to, the issues we've raised, can you also just add to that? Is it possible? Well, it would seem that Dr. Falaye has implied that equity may not be truly possible in a constitutional democracy.
Well, I think to begin, democracy is a form of government that is probably and should be the only game in town for now, for many reasons. And the first reason is that democracy is probably the only form of government that speaks directly to the human nature. The basic instinct to participate, to be heard, to take control of your at least have a modicum of control of what happens to your society and all. It's only guaranteed under, a democratic setting. Now, we need to be very careful, and be clear in the nuances of what we're talking about.
True.
Democracy as a form of government is also varied. There's not just one brand of democracy. You spoke of socialism. There's social democracy. There's constitutional democracy, like Dr. Falaye says. There's representative, a whole lot of democracy. Now, the top of the range is liberal democracy, which is what obtains in the US and we try to mimic.
Yes.
Now what that means is it's calibrated by the levels of freedom, that you aspire to give your citizenry and the levels of their participation as well. Being a relatively young democracy, maybe liberal democracy is ambitious. By all means, that is the point we must gravitate towards. We can't start and have a liberal democracy in 10, 20, 30 years. But that is where we want to get to. Now, the second layer, that has come up in this conversation is a form of democratic governance, whether parliamentary or presidential. That is the one we, again, try to be an avatar of the US, in a presidential, and that is the one I believe Dr. Falaye is alluding to, that is expensive, compared with the parliamentary system, for instance. So, it's layers of comparisons we're talking about. But I think that, yes, I agree that we have to find what works best for Nigeria, but that has the basic elements, of democratic governance, inclusion, participation, transparency, freedom. All of those must be in whatever system we adopt, and then we calibrate to fit our own context, and our history and our political experience. So that is what I think works best. But there's no doubt, that democracy is the game that we must play. We shouldn't be in a rush. We're still developing the ancillary institutions that will pop up our democracy and make it functional. And, I think we've been a bit of a haste. We need to work as in other times, but these things take time. And we're going to get better. I mean, yesterday, for instance, we were at a meeting and we're just amazed by, the amount of progress we have made in our electioneering process. I mean, the last elections we have seen, for instance, INEC has called for me, straight A's. And that is to tell you that improvements are possible, and that we're going to improve not only with the EMB, but with other structures and institutions of democracy.
Dr. Remy, I get it. I get it, and I hear you loud and clear. There is hope for our democracy. There is absolutely no doubt about that. Many Nigerians would like to see whether it's representative democracy or as we move towards liberal democracy, or would like to see some responses that are impactful and all of that. But I'd like to stay with you and take you up on an issue, although we'll continue our line of conversation down the line. But then more than half of Nigeria's population, in fact, let me make it more expansive and say more than half of Africa's population is said to be food insecure. So the situation is that we have food deserts across major parts of the continent where consumers likely spend more than 50% of their income on food alone. Here in Nigeria, the situation is exacerbated by insecurity, banditry, and a couple of other conflicts. But speaking generally now, and Dr. Aderemi, I would like for you to just help us put this into perspective. How can the national government provide the tools that people need to lift themselves out of hunger and perhaps malnutrition as well, since we made allusions to food deserts, as well as take wise decisions to impact on food choices and supply?
Well, I think next to security, the general well-being, what we sometimes call the public good, should be the main business of government. Okay? That we're not able, if you contrast the situations, not just in Nigeria, in the developing South, what obtains in, say, Europe and America, you only spend a fraction of your money on food. Okay, over there. There, like you have said, you spend the preponderant, portion of your, these are still symptoms of their teaching problems. I don't think there's any government that does not take welfare seriously. We haven't gotten it right, no doubt, for a myriad of reasons. But no doubt, general welfare, food security, all of that, they are priority for any government. They are priorities for the current government, irrespective of how we feel. I understand how things are out there, but in the case of Nigeria, of course, we've had, insecurity for the past, decade or so, and it's worsening. That is definitely going to affect the food, supply. Second thing is that, and people must realize this, that a constellation of events, have actually, of international events that the Nigerian government does not have control over, have colluded to also exacerbate situation. The crisis in Ukraine affecting the price of oil, the global energy crisis, all of those combined, just making inflation run away. Having said that, there are a lot of things we can do better. Don't forget that we are a state that is completely not even to welfareism, and we don't give you a dole if you're unemployed, for instance, like you get in the there is talk about subsidies, but they are not efficient, in my opinion. More like you have the welfare system in advanced countries where you're underemployed or you are unemployed or you are disabled for whatever reasons. Government is there to provide a buffer. So what it is here is that it is not that food security or general welfare is not prioritized. It's just a reflection of our capacity as a state and of the capacity of our institutions.
Dr. Fowler, can you come in here quickly? Sorry, did I, Dr. Aderemi, did I allow you land there?
No, it's okay. I think I got it sufficient here.
Oh, great, fantastic. Dr. Flori, please come into this issue. Your good friend has, just submitted that the structures are on ground. That creates platform for average citizens in Nigeria to be able to take wise choices on both, food production and on supply. Do you agree with his assertion, with his point of view?
Okay, let me quickly say something before I respond to that. With what my professor said, let us take the issue in Ukraine. There is the interruption of the flow of wheat from Ukraine. And when you look at the whole world today, with this war going on, people are, they are more or less, looking inward to find solution to their problems. You see all countries, I'm going to do this. What happened in Ukraine, it could happen to me tomorrow. But when you look at the whole of Africa, if you sample what they were saying about the shortage of food coming from Eastern Europe, Ukraine and Russia, what do they say? We are hungry. They should release food to the world so that we can eat. When you hear that, I get so disappointed. It's because we don't have vision. We have land. Can't we, cultivate food to feed ourselves? A country that cannot feed itself is highly vulnerable.
True.
2% of American farmers, they can feed the whole of the United States. If given the opportunity, they can feed the whole of the United States. But in our own case, we have developed that cargo cult mentality. Oh, we need something. Let us wait for Europe. Let us wait for America to come and feed us. America is not going to feed you. Europe is not there to feed you. We have to feed ourselves. And it all depends on the vision of the leader we have. I can take you into the 6 Chiefs. We have all these agriculture, here and there, farming everywhere. We can feed ourselves. We import food. In fact, like in Malaysia, we introduce palm kernel to them now. But now we are importing palm kernel. We have oil. We are importing oil to the country. We have all these things, but there is no way we are using them. That's about the fact that this country, Nigeria, is highly blessed with human resources and natural resources. Yes, Nigeria is a rich country with poor, where the people are poor. Why?
Well, there's
anytime I go out, I see the faces of Nigerians. When I was there, sincerely, I cry. You can sit in it's not an election, they'll be giving them rice, bag of rice. Is that what we need?
No, exactly not what we need. And that's part of why we're having this conversation and why we're trying to set agenda here. Of course, if you remember the video we played at the very beginning of this session, and people are very interested in what happens, to us as a country as we approach this transition. But gentlemen, and I would like to stick to the issue of governance and politics. But then I'm sure you may have happened on a few of Adam Grant's book. I myself recently spent some time perusing his work, Think Again, where he said the best predictors of the future aren't smarter, they are just willing to take one more look, one more time than the other folks. I know no one gets it right most of the time, but it is possible to be wrong less often. With that in mind, Dr. Aderemi, why is it that within the context of politics and governance in Nigeria, we tend to think of mistakes as threats to our ego and not as opportunities for growth? Take the Constitution, for instance, the devolution of power and the not so subtle concentration of power in the center. Shouldn't the debate on regional and state competitiveness be in the thick of public policy discourse as we approach the next year's transition?
You just spoke directly to the heart of the national question. With that question you just posed, that's the bane of Nigerian politics. It's the highly voracious nature of our political elite that throws up, those kind of contradictions within the state. I think that, those are one that is one of the fundamental dislocations of the Nigerian state, and that unless we address, issues like this of the national question, the issues we have been, talking about of performance, of welfare, of good governance, will only be aberrations. So this is really what we need to tackle. See, for me, I've always described the Nigerian state as a tragedy of the commons. It is a highly voracious. Well, I mean, the 1999 Constitution is a very defective constitution. But having said that, remember also that in the First Republic, power was concentrated in the regions. Okay, the regions were, they had runaway hegemonic, powers, compared to the center. The center was very weak. It was by conscious choice that we said, look, the powerful region collapsed in 1966. Let us not have a repeat. And that was why in 1979, we deliberately opted to have a strong center. Okay, now the center again, we are crying, the strong center is not working. So what that tells you is that there's something else. It is not, the overpowerful center or the overpowerful regions, that is.
So how do we balance it out?
Now, something else is wrong. I think it's in the principle and logic of administering the Nigerian state and the character of the political elite. That is what, closes up. Look, if you balance the relationship between the region and the center, or you calibrate it to be whatever people say through the federalism and all of that, we will still probably have these problems unless we address, subnational, ethnic balancing, unless we prioritize, popular, governance and all of those things. So for me, I think of forms of government, let foods contain. It is not a fundamental issue. It is a problem. I think the way it is completely lopsided. Don't get me wrong. I'm not in support of a strong center. But what I'm saying is that something else, the logic of administering the Nigerian state, the very pernicious political elites that we have are probably more of the problem than give them a good constitution. Bring the American constitution, we'll find a way to violate it in the trust of ethnic politics. So that's what we really need to address. How do we manage ourselves as a Commonwealth? Respecting our diversities and our equalities. That is what I think, we should be talking about.
Dr. Faraye, is it the constitution or is it the character of our political elite?
The constitution itself is it cannot work by itself. It's only the people that will operate it that matters. You can correct the constitution, and there is no constitution that can self-correct itself. No, we will correct it. The question is, when you look at the evolution of the constitutional process in Nigeria, what we have in Nigeria, at least at the moment, Nigeria has always been a federation without federalism. We have a federation without federalism. Federation is just the structure. But federalism is the system, the relationship, the interrelationship between the center and the peripheries. But when you have, when the center has become, a gargantuan octopus, penetrated every nook and cranny of the country, that is a recipe for disaster. Now, the people have been crying about this for a long time. Do they want to tell me that they don't want to know what to do? In the 60s, when you have, in the 60s, 1960, 1963 Constitution, when you have devolution of power to the state, there is competition between the states. I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to be ahead of East, I want to be ahead of the North. That is how to generate, development. But when the power is concentrated in the center, at the center, and there is a reason for that, because people who believe that a strong federation is good, they have a reason for saying that, and I believe it is because, where they have all these things at the center, you have a state that is not contributing anything. If you check the statistics, that some states, they can't even pay them, they can't pay salaries. They have to depend on the federal government handout to survive. Tell me,
Dr. Falaye, I know that is that happens, that is obtainable, but I think that sometime in the recent past I had a discussion with one of my guests where we talked about some states not being creative enough to think outside the box, in taking care of themselves, and it's an issue of funding and generating revenue as that. But you are both, Dr. Falaye and Dr. Aderemi, you have both made allusions to the character of the political elite, and I must confess again that Adams Grant's book, Think Again, has been a learning curve for me, because yet again I learned something quite a bit about the first rule of prejudice, which is don't perpetuate prejudice. So when we say politicians in Nigeria are all about self-interest and not public interest, isn't that perpetuating prejudice? How can we discountenance this particular prejudice, knowing and seeing some of the shenanigans ensuing within the political arena as we head towards the national elections next year? For the sake of decorum, I would not be specific on examples, but I tell you, there are plenty of indicators out there. I think, Dr. Aderemi, let's begin with you.
See, let me go into specifics. You see, again, let me go to what I said about the logic of administering the Nigerian state. It has been referred to by one of my former professors as a tripod set theory. That is how they have managed country. Is the interest of the big three must be balanced. Everything must be represented. And that itself, is not sustainable. It is not. That once you balance the interest of the Hausa Fulani as a group, the Yoruba and the Igbos, then you will not upset the Nigerian Federation. And everything we do, talk about federal character, we talk about what's the other one? Quota system. Okay, now that is not a recipe for development. You cannot develop if you administer the state that way, because sometimes you then make economically irrational choices just because you want to balance interest. Much as that is important. Now, what I think we need to do is to first of all begin. I hope we have a national leader that will begin a project of blurring our diversities. We haven't done that since we have been a state, nation. We have made our identities, our sub-ethnic identities fixated, and we have not at all developed what it means to be a Nigerian. The Nigerian identity is vacuous. You don't even know what it means. You know what it means to be an Igbo man. You know what it means. What does it mean to be a Nigerian? And we have not hold on to our diversities. That needs to be blurred. That needs to be completely, wiped away, and then we begin to mold. The day I will see somebody who is Muhammad Adamu, which state are you from? I'm from Oyo State. I'm from Imo State. Then we have a situation here where a Jeb Bush, the governor of Texas, a George Bush, the governor of Florida, of the same king, irrespective of where you were born or where you come from. That's where we begin to talk of statehood. And nation. That's where we begin to construct this nation. Now we have been stagnant, with this logic of administering the state in three spheres: Yoruba, Hausa, and then maybe sometimes we talk about the minorities. So that itself is a defective system, and we need to find a way to move on from that and begin to think seriously about development, about putting the right feet in the right places. The north of Nigeria alone, and I can tell you this, has the capacity to feed the whole of West Africa. Sometimes we subject agriculture, we see from the prism of ethnicity. We see who should be president from the reasons of ethnicity, of religion, of everything. So that is the bane of this country.
So Dr. Aderemi, in submission, your point is, and remember we were talking about not perpetuating prejudice, and especially in saying that all politicians are bad. For instance, all politicians are corrupt. I mean, these are prejudices that exist in the public space. So you are saying that it all and solely depends on leadership and governance to change this narrative.
That's precisely my point. I don't think, I don't subscribe to that stereotyping that all political leaders are bad. In the main leadership has been, the tragedy of this country. But look, I interface with politicians on a daily basis. And I've met a few with lofty ideas, but they're in a significant minority. So it's not correct to say all politicians are visionless, are bad, are corrupt, are self-serving. No. Because I have, for instance, look, I won't mention names, but I've seen a couple of politicians, who tried to take the sides of youth during the NSAS. And they confronted the National Assembly and said, look, we need to do something. There are trickles of people like that. So it is not true to say all politicians are bad or all of them are visionless. No. But you see, the logic I was referring to of administering this nation, you see, you have to be, where we see it is that Nigeria belongs to nobody. When I have this opportunity to be in the center of things, let me take as much as I can. Because nobody's money. Let me take it. If I don't take it and I leave, somebody else will come and take it. So, and that's the tragedy of the commons, I'm telling you. And that is why sometimes you don't realize how difficult it is to be an ethical politician in this country. The system itself does not encourage it. So it is not sufficient to say that, look, all politicians, are bad and all. I don't think so. What I think our bane is that we see ourselves differently. And we have fixated on this. We have canonized it. It's sacrosanct that you must see yourself first as an Igbo man before you see yourself as a Nigerian, and then you are in direct competition with the outside the Yorubas. So that for me must change. And we have lacked a leader that is willing to lead by example and saying, look, it doesn't matter where you come from. Let us develop this country. Let us build a Nigerian identity that will supersede your ethnic, your sub-ethnic, national identity. That is what I think a nation building project should be.
Fantastic. Dr. Falaye, at what point can we get to so much that we can discountenance and that prejudice that politicians are generally corrupt?
Well, it's totally erroneous for somebody to say that all politicians are corrupt. No, there are some of them that are truly committed to good governance, and those that are there for to make money, quote unquote. But again, it is the elite in the society that are the vehicle of development in any society. But when the elites themselves, they are corrupt, they don't have any vision on where they are taking the country to. You see kind of this articulation between the governor and the governed. When you see that, not just in Nigeria, even in Europe, people are fed up with democracy. The gap between those who are governors and those that are governed, the gap is always there. And this is then why people are frustrated that maybe democracy is not the best way to go. Because when you elect somebody, to represent your interest, but the first thing is to represent his own interest. Understandably, it's a survivor for the politician to survive the next election. But at the same time, I don't think, we don't have what I will call accountability in Nigeria. There is no accountability.
That's actually
that the people can hold the elected officials accountable. If they are accountable, it will be better, that
people are crying for change. People are suffering, and you see the same government as telling them that you go and be praying. You can't go to your farm to farm. You have to go and pray. If you want government say you have to be carrying guns.
Well, that is where the inclusion and participation that Dr.
That's the symptom of a fair society.
Dr. Falaye, I recall Dr. Ade Remy referencing inclusion and participation in his very first submission when we were talking about democracy and how integral it is to have inclusiveness and active participation. I'd like to zero in, and of course, Dr. Ade Remy believes, from what I have been able to deduce, believes absolutely or near absolutely in democracy. You know, Dr. Ade Remy, I would like to take you up someday on epistocracy as an alternative to democracy, and we'll see how that goes. But for now, I'd like to thank you both gentlemen. I mean, Dr. Adewale Aderemi, Associate Professor of Political Science and Director of Democracy and Governance, National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies here in Abuja. Thank you so much for coming on Insight.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Akin Falaye, of course, who joined us from Houston, Texas, United States. He was there with us, and then he jackpot to United States. I mean, he was a former senior research fellow of the same institute as our good doctor, the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies here in Abuja.
Hey, Prof.
Thank you so much, Doc.
Oh, my brother.
How are you?
You should call yourselves sometime and not on Insight. I'd like to thank you so much for coming on the program. I have to move on now. I have to move on now. Elizabeth Omori is standing by for more on Insight.
Professionals in the building industry have attributed frequent building collapse in Nigeria to involvement of quacks, use of substandard materials, non-implementation of building codes, and lack of monitoring of building approvals. The continued rate at which buildings collapse in Nigeria is very alarming, especially those under construction. Surveys have shown that one of the major causes of building collapse is the failure and lack of efforts of building contractors to pay strict adherence to quality building materials. How do we cut building collapse in Nigeria? Engineer Emebi Onecho, Director Product Certification of the Standards Organization of Nigeria, who joins us via Zoom, will answer some of our questions. Engineer, thank you so much for joining us on Insight.
Thank you.
Let's begin with the spate of collapse. This is worrisome. How concerned is the Standards Organization of Nigeria?
Well, talking of building collapse is a situation that everybody should be worried about in Nigeria, especially when it involves high-rise buildings. I will take you back to the case of Ikoyi building collapse. We went there, and fortunately for us, we realized the materials used were actually good, but the issue now are other components of constructions, like the ratio of the mixing and the design done for the building and all that, which other regulatory agencies will have to talk about that. And we're all present at the coronary court, and we presented our fact based on what our responsibilities are. In our own case, SON is all about the materials, and all the material used for that building was okay. But the factor that led to the collapse of that building are other factors, which, if you have the full report of that committee set up to look at that issue, I'm sure you get the details what actually happened. The Nigerian Sort of Engineer, everybody was involved, Carbon, and everybody was present with other stakeholders. Everybody gave their input, and at the end of the day, today we have the full report of what actually happened and caused the collapse of that building. And recently again, another building collapsed at Oniru side. We have gone there, picked the samples of all the material used in that construction, which we have sent to the lab. We are waiting for the outcome of the result right now. When we get the result, we'll be able to tell Nigerians exactly what happened. If it's the material used that caused the collapse, we will know.
All right, engineer, more recently is a hotel in Awoshika in Ibadan. The quality of building material is an important aspect of any structure. What is the SON doing to ensure we have quality building materials available in our markets?
You see, the truth is this. We have a special task force that look at most of this material I'm talking about. In Nigeria today, you can't talk of substandard cement. It's not possible. And iron rod, we are still on their neck. And I think we are getting improvement every day and day. So before we were importing iron rod into Nigeria, now you can see that iron rod, I can tell you more than 99% are produced in Nigeria now. And we visit them every quarter. Apart from that, we have task force that is always on their, on them, checking them unannounced to see that everything goes well. Sometimes we go to the market, pick samples of these products, test it to know how they are faring in terms of quality of the iron rod they are pushing to the market. And sometimes we go to construction site to pick samples of the material, test again, and then to know what exactly the people are using for the construction. We try to go extra mile to ensure that they use the right material for any building they are doing in Nigeria.
I'll take you back to the recent collapse in Ibadan. Now, some of the builders actually complained about the specification of the iron rods. And I know this is a very important aspect of building. How often does your agency sensitize on building materials?
Recently, we had an awareness on this, in terms of sensitization. The 6 geopolitical zones, starting from Lagos, we went to Kano, Kano to Asaba, and the rest of the regions in the country. And we met with the distributor, the manufacturer. Even as we speak, we are still in touch with them. We have eventually forced them to form themselves into an association, which will give some credit to what we call, that will give rise to self-regulations, you understand? Because in any economy of the world, self-regulation is usually the best type of regulation. If the sector can self-regulate and do it well, then the government agencies is just to look at what they are doing to ensure that they are on the right track. And again, in this part of our world, we have to find a way to stop the use of quack. It's a very, very significant part of this collapse building that we are hearing. The use of quacks, because you want to minimize the cost of your building, you go and employ quacks to manage the building for you. The material may be okay and the design may be okay. If you use quack to actually build a house, the outcome is what we are seeing now. This is one of the things we have to take seriously. All the agencies and government, all the bodies concerned in management of construction in Nigeria have to come together and like never before, and we strategize to ensure that the use of quack is stopped in totality in Nigeria. For any construction to be done, you need an engineer on site. An architect will design, an engineer will pick up the design and then follow up the design to build a house. An engineer is expected to be on site always to monitor what the laborers are doing. So you go to most of these sites, you don't see an engineer there. Somebody who claims he's an engineer, he is not an engineer. You must be registered with the Nigerian Society of Engineers or foreign to practice as an engineer in Nigeria. But unfortunately, what you see there, they are not even an engineer. They don't have a degree in anything building or civil engineering. But they are there on the side. They are building or reconstructing an old building. Eventually, what you see is collapse. There is quackery, patronage of quack people. That is what is leading to all these things. One of the major factors. And we have to find a way to stop that.
So we need to encourage people not to engage them. Now, talking about sanctions, I believe the SON has the teeth to bite. So are there sanctions for dealers of building materials who do not adhere to specifications?
Sure. If you are caught, like recently we over 200 tons was evacuated from a particular market in Lagos, and we traced it to the manufacturer, because for every iron rod you see in the market, they have unique identification mark. We can trace any iron rod to the manufacturer. There's a mark registered for them. So when we found that product in that market, we took them back to the factory that manufactured it, and then pushed them back into the furnace and melt them again. So under our strict supervision, that was done, and they pay a fine to the federal government through the TSA.
What is the way out of this menace? We call it a menace because people die, people lose their lives, they lose body parts, people lose their jobs, people lose their homes in the process.
What that is saying, that all the agencies concerned or other bodies, we have to come together like never before to ensure, first, stop the use of quackery, ensure designs of buildings are approved through the right process, and then all the what do I call it now, the material used on site are of good quality. If we pull her together and ensure this is done, I'm sure we'll get out of this.
My final question to you is this. I understand this might actually not be within the purview of the organization, but when a building is about to be constructed or while under construction, shouldn't the SON be involved in this? It is a project, fine, we know.
We have to work within the act. We work within, we have an act that guides our operations.
Okay.
And that act to us is the extant law of the land that, specify to which extent we can, what we can do in terms of building materials. And the primary responsibility of is to ensure that the right quality material is sent to the market, which is what we are making an effort to, to see that happens.
All right, Engineer Enebi Oncheyo, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us on Insight this week.
Amina Mohammed, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala.
Agencies and stakeholders to proactively tackle these challenges.
Women in most countries of the world constitute about 50% of registered voters.
Williams, reporting for Dateline 360.
In Jos, Caleb Gochin, Dateline 360.
Naja'atu Tijani.
Dateline 360. Chidi Okrafo.
For Dateline 360.
In Lagos, Michael Olaleye.
Reporting for Dateline 360.
I am Omosola Omojola. Thanks for tuning in to Dateline 360.
And that's it on this episode of the program. Do join us same time next week for more on Insight. My name is Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. Be your brother's keeper. Remain patriotic. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Although social media as a channel of communication is inherently harmless, it becomes harmful and damaging when used without discretion and thoughtfulness. Bad social media users spread rumors and fake news without verification,